My name is Michael, and 3 years ago, I started working the night shift at a hospital morgue to cover my university expenses. Little did I know that this job would change my perspective on life and death forever. The hospital was an old building, its corridors echoing with whispers of countless stories untold. My shift usually began at 10 p.m. and ended at 6 a.m. Most nights were uneventful, filled with paperwork and the occasional new arrival. I had grown accustomed to the cold silence of the morgue, the hum of the refrigeration units, my constant companion. It was a particularly chilly November night when everything changed. The clock had just struck midnight, and I was doing my routine checks when I heard it, a faint sound coming from the corridor outside. At first I dismissed it as the building settling or perhaps a night nurse making rounds. But as the sound grew louder and more distinct, I couldn't ignore it any longer. With my heart pounding, I stepped out into the dimly lit hallway. The fluorescent lights flickered ominously, casting dancing shadows on the walls. The sound was clearer now, a slow, rhythmic squeaking, like that of wheels in desperate need of oil. It was coming from around the corner, growing louder with each passing second. I stood frozen, my mind racing through possibilities. Was it a prank by the day shift? A new delivery that I hadn't been informed about? Or something far more sinister? The logical part of my brain fought against the growing panic, but years of watching horror movies had primed me for the worst. Gathering what little courage I had, I inched forward. The squeaking stopped abruptly as I reached the corner. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of my ragged breathing. With trembling hands, I reached for my flashlight, its beam cutting through the darkness as I peered around the corner. What I saw made my blood run cold. A gurney stood in the middle of the hallway, a white sheet draped over a distinctly human-shaped form. I blinked hard, convinced I was hallucinating, but when I opened my eyes, the scene remained unchanged. Suddenly, the sheet moved. A pale, wrinkled hand emerged from beneath it, grasping at the air. I stumbled backward, my back hitting the wall as a scream lodged in my throat. The hand continued to move, slowly pulling the sheet away to reveal the face of an elderly man. His eyes fluttered open, confusion etched across his features. In a voice barely above a whisper, he asked, "Where am I?" I stood there, paralyzed with fear and disbelief. The man on the gurney shouldn't be moving, shouldn't be speaking. He had been pronounced dead hours ago. As I later learned, what I witnessed that night was an incredibly rare phenomenon known as Lazarus syndrome. Named after the biblical figure raised from the dead, it's a condition where spontaneous return of circulation occurs after failed cardiopulmonary resuscitation. The man, I discovered, was 76-year-old Harold Thompson. He had been admitted to the hospital with severe pneumonia and had seemingly passed away despite the doctor's best efforts. His death had been recorded, and he had been sent to the morgue, where I found him awakening from what should have been his final sleep. The events of that night shook me to my core. It challenged everything I thought I knew about life and death. The line between the two, I realized, was far thinner than I had ever imagined. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake off the image of Harold's hand emerging from beneath the sheet. I had nightmares about it, waking up in cold sweats, convinced I could hear the squeaking of gurney wheels in the darkness of my room. But as time passed, my fear gradually transformed into a profound appreciation for the mysteries of life. I began to see my job differently. Each body that came into the morgue was no longer just a statistic, but a story, a life lived, with all its joys and sorrows. Harold's case made headlines, of course. Medical professionals from around the country came to study this extraordinary event. And Harold? He made a full recovery, returning home to his astonished family, who had already begun planning his funeral. As for me, I continued working at the morgue, but with a newfound respect for the unpredictability of life and death. Every night shift became an opportunity to reflect on the thin veil that separates the living from the departed. Years have passed since that fateful night, but its memory remains vivid. Now, as I pursue my medical degree, I carry with me the lesson I learned in that dark hospital corridor, that life is precious, fleeting, and sometimes utterly inexplicable. The experience taught me to approach both life and death with humility and wonder. And though the sound of squeaky wheels still makes my heart race, it also reminds me of the night I witnessed a miracle, the night death itself was delayed, if only for a while. Ahmet and his friends had finally found the perfect time for their long-planned camping trip. Eager to escape the hustle and bustle of Istanbul, they decided to camp in a forest deep within the Black Sea region, known for its dense woods and mysterious tales. According to local legends, many had gone missing in this forest, never to be found again. But in the modern world, these stories were often dismissed as mere folklore. They arrived at the forest late at night. Darkness had already fallen, and the eerie sounds from the depths of the woods began to unsettle them. Trying to keep spirits high, Ahmet reassured his friends, "This place is creepy, but don't worry, it's just stories." They set up their tents and lit a campfire, trying to shake off the unease. As the night wore on, the silence of the forest was punctuated by strange whispers and the crunch of leaves underfoot. One of their group, Mehmet, stepped out of the tent for a bathroom break but never returned. When dawn broke, the group searched for him frantically, but Mehmet was nowhere to be found. In a panic, they drove to the nearest village to get help. The local gendarmerie launched an extensive search, combing through the forest for days. Despite their efforts, Mehmet had vanished without a trace. Months passed, and Ahmet couldn't shake the haunting memories of Mehmet's disappearance. Determined to find answers, he decided to return to the forest alone one night. As he ventured deeper into the woods, he felt an unsettling sensation, as if someone or something was watching him. Cold sweat trickled down his back as he saw shadows dancing in the beam of his flashlight. Suddenly, something wrapped around his ankles. Pointing his flashlight down, he saw a tattered rope and an old blood-stained cloth. His heart pounded as he moved the light a bit further and saw a partially buried body under a tree. Recognizing the remnants of Mehmet's clothes, Ahmet's blood ran cold. Terrified, Ahmet started running back towards the campsite, but the sound of footsteps followed him. He sprinted, his breath ragged, but the footsteps kept pace. Exhausted and panicked, he finally reached the campsite, looking around frantically, but no one was there. The next morning, Ahmet reported everything to the village authorities. The gendarmerie returned to the site, and, after digging where Ahmet had indicated, they indeed found Mehmet's body. Yet, the mystery behind his death remained unsolved. No clues were found to explain what happened in the depths of that forest. Ahmet and his friends never set foot in that forest again. The tale of Mehmet's disappearance and his tragic end became a new legend among the villagers, adding to the eerie stories of the forest.